inaugural LIASA CHELSA Open Science Symposium. I'm Cornel Skeltema van Beek from the University of the Free State Library and Information Services at the Digital Scholarship Center, and I will be your program director for the day. We have 4 esteemed speakers on open science with us today, but before we listen to them, I would like to ask Ms. Linda Ntaka to share with you the purpose of the day. Ms. Ntaka is the area head for the City of Cape Town Libraries and LIASA's PRO. Linda?
Thank you, Cornel. I'm just going to share my video for a brief moment. And just to save on the data, and then I'm going to close.
Linda, you muted yourself by accident, I think.
Yes, I muted myself. Thank you, because I was trying to. Okay, good morning to the members of CHELSA and LIASA Association. Thank you for joining. My name is Linda Ntaka. I appreciate everyone who's on this platform for joining this important initiative. Welcome to the first joint LIASA or CHELSA Open Science Symposium of many anticipated Open Access Week. Open for Climate Justice is the theme for this year's International Open Access Week. Open Access Week, as we all know, is an opportunity for the academic and research community to continue to learn about the potential benefits of open access. This symposium will share what the colleagues have learned and will help inspire wider participation in helping to make open access to continue a norm in scholarship and research. The theme for this year seeks to encourage the connection and collaboration among the climate movement and the open community. The climate crisis that we all know about requires a rapid exchange of knowledge across all disciplinary boundaries in South Africa through open sources. LIASA intends to host the full-day Open Science Symposium every year as a collaboration with CHELSA in order to share resources and knowledge. The intended symposium will include the research community, universities, public libraries, and other sectors. This will create a platform to share our development as a nation and learn from each other. As the theme suggests, we are all affected by the climate crisis, so this knowledge must be shared with all South African communities. The program today will look at the growth of open scholarship in South Africa, open access, open data, and SDGs in relation to open access. I therefore invite everyone who's not a speaker to ensure that you are on mute all the time. And I would like to close by expressing my sincere wishes for the success of this symposium and for all participants to discover new opportunities in the growing area of research and to engage in a productive discussion and exchange knowledge in order for us to take this future of knowledge and research forward. Thank you, Cornel.
Thank you very much, Linda. I think we're all looking forward to the symposium today. I would like to ask participants if you haven't put in your name when you joined this Zoom meeting, to change it just to make it easy for us to know who's commenting. If you hover over your participant image, you'll see 3 option dots, and if you click on that, you can rename the name that is presenting. So please, welcome again, and if you have any comments or questions for the speakers or for your colleagues, please leave that in the chat. If time allows, After each speaker, we will take some questions. The recording will be made available after the symposium. And for the speakers, you're very welcome. And I will try to ever so subtly remind you when there are about 5 minutes left of your talk. But now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Ms. Ellen Thijs has been the Senior Director of Library and Information Services at Stellenbosch University since January 2006. She previously held the positions of University Librarian at the University of the Western Cape and Deputy University Librarian at the University of the Witwatersrand. She holds a B-Bibble Honours degree from UWC and an MPhil in Science and Technology Studies from SU. Among other notable leadership roles, Ms. Thijs served as the first president of LIASA from 1998 to 2002 and president of IFLA for the years 2009 to 2011. She also served as chair of the board of the National Library of South Africa 2012 to 2015 and on the OCLC Board of Trustees 2014 to 2018. So she's just started a second 2-year term as chair of the Freedom of Access to Information and Freedom of Expression Advisory Committee of IFLA. She's also the recipient of several awards for distinguished leadership and outstanding contributions to librarianship, including honorary membership of LIASA and an honorary IFLA fellowship. She has published various articles in professional journals and is a regular speaker at national and international conferences, seminars, and symposia like this one. Ellen, we look forward to your presentation. Would you like me to share on your behalf? I'm sorry, you're still muted. Ellen? Can you unmute, please?
Muted. So I was sorry. I was just saying yes. No, I'm struggling to. It looked like to share my screen. So maybe let me just see. But it's asking me now to open, and I did ask somebody. So maybe you could share, please.
Yes, sure. Anytime. You can just tell me when to move on to the next slide.
Yes.
Is that fine?
Yes, yes. Thank you very much for the introduction and the invitation to speak at the symposium this morning. And as you see from, from the title of my slide, I'm going to speak to you largely in my capacity as chairperson of the SENLIC Board of Directors, and the efforts of SENLIC over the last couple of years on how we are trying to accelerate the growth of South African open scholarship through transformational agreements. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard, I'm not going to go into definitions of what all of these things are. There's been a lot of talk and discussions about this over the last number of years. So I'm going to focus specifically on what SENLIC has been doing and to provide a little bit of background why this is so important for us to follow this route and with the aim of accelerating growth of the South African scholarship. Thank you. Okay, thanks. Next slide. So I'm going to start, therefore, by, before we have embarked on these transformational agreements, SENLIC had conducted done research in terms of the data regarding research output of South Africa, and to inform us And we have learned from other countries who have started these agreements that it's very important that you need to understand what the research output looks like, so that when we start engaging with the publishers around this, that it is based on facts and the data that we have. So what you can see here is that most of our research was published in what we call the subscription model. That means behind the paywall, and that is specifically then in terms of where each institution have a subscription to a database with a number of journals. In most of these cases, you have basically paid, you pay to read the research in those journals. And then, of course, what was very important behind the paywall means that is without author rights retention. And I'm sorry, I was supposed to put in the pie chart here. However, some of the significant high-level observation about South Africa's research output trend, which shows 1 foot behind the subscription paywall and 1 foot in open access. And as you can see there, in terms of the blue, for example, that's bronze, that's free access. Then the gold is where it is a gold hybrid, which means that you pay an APC, an article processing fee, to make it accessible so that others don't have to pay to read that article. And then you have the gold ones where it is basically just published as a digital copy, and everybody has access to it from the start. So publishing in gold open access has been growing significantly year after year. Publishing OA in hybrid journals is struggling to take off, probably because of obstacles such as researchers' inability paying author-facing charges, and particularly in South Africa, where we on top, it's not just the fact that we have to pay, but most of what we publish in international journals, or published in journals from publishers in other parts of the world. And we therefore have to pay either in euro, pounds, or in dollars. And that means that what we pay the APC, of course, is also subject to exchange rate. However, the combined OA publishing indicates a trend where the total cost of publishing OA is doubling every 3 to 5 years, even if article processing charges pricing remains constant. So if we cannot afford to pay to read, how can we ever afford to pay to publish on top of that? So despite the doubling in the growth of OA publishing close behind the paywall continues to grow annually, albeit at a slower rate than the growth in OA publishing. So it very quickly becomes evident that this particular trend is financially unsustainable. Next slide. So if we look at this slide, it shows the top 20 publishers based on corresponding author share for South Africa. And here it speaks relatively to relative importance of certain research venues to South Africa. The ESSEC registry, this is a registry where they keep track of all transformational agreements from around the world. To keep track of that data is interactive, and one can drill down into and you see the hyperlink to that. And it can drill down into details for each publisher to see the publishing model breakdown. And as you can see here, the top publisher research avenue that we're using in South Africa is in Elsevier, and specifically, obviously, to a large extent, that would means the Science Direct, but also, of course, some of the single titles that you can subscribe through Elsevier. That is followed by Springer Nature, 13%, Taylor and Francis. Then we're looking at Wiley, 8.1%. And then we have Sage. So we're really looking here at what they describe as the top 5 worldwide. That is now open access, including also hybrid. And this, as I said, this just showed to you where our money is going to in terms of libraries and what we're paying for in terms of subscriptions, and broader universities in terms of APCs. Next slide, please. So just here, this also continues to show that most of our research resides, as is already indicated earlier on, with our big 5 publishers, and over 85% of that research. So 85% of what we publish is behind the paywall. Again, published without retention of author copyrights. So we are only able to put in our institutional repositories, making our research public, that has been paid through public funding to a large extent. And in order for us to make that available, we need to publish in open access. We need to make our research in South Africa. If we want to grow research in South Africa, then of course we need to make our research more accessible. And as we can see here, 85% of South Africa's research output is still behind the paywall. Next slide. So, in order then for us to address this and move towards a situation, first of all, seeing that read access is decreasing, open access, although it's still also increasing, this is what the publishers tell us, but open access journals are also increasing. Our buying power in South Africa, which is basically diminishing year on year in terms of the exchange rate, in terms of budgets, in terms of basically the affordability, if we consider South Africa's GDP, for example, against some like the UK and the US, it is, and as I've indicated right at the start, this is clearly not sustainable. Every year we have to consider, are we going to cancel everything if the university is not going to give us more increase than the CPI and to cover the exchange rate? So, and then of course, as many researchers more and more are basically mandated and required to publish in these open access forums because of the grants that they're receiving, the only way that we're going to address that is if we can reduce the funding that is required by researchers on top of the subscription that we're paying for them to, of course, be able to publish, at least when it comes to the open access journals, you know, without having to pay for that. And that is basically why SANDIC then, after we have developed a statement on open access, then we have developed principles for negotiations where we set out very clearly, these are the principles on which we're going to negotiate. And this is what publishers need to come to bring to the party. And that is that we're looking for agreements that includes subscription, that read access, as well as publishing, that should be included in the one agreement, that we pay for to read, and that we also pay for being able to publish in the journals, open access journals of that particular publisher. So we came up with a plan. There are 3 phases for the plan. In phase 1, we had negotiated already 6 transformational agreements. You can see those on the screen. And these are, in most cases, we basically, part of our principles, we say it should be a 3-year plan, a 3-year agreement, so that we don't have to go back every year. And there's a lot of issues and intricacies in terms of what the agreement entails, how many articles you are able to publish in, what are we eligible for in terms of what we published in the year before, how do they accommodate the increase, and then in the fees for the following year. But as you can see there, so those are the 6 that we have signed, 3 in 2021, and now 3 for 2022, which is the last 3, Wiley, Sage, and Emerald. in phase 2, which is the ones that we're negotiating this year, and again, based on our principles, a key principle is social justice, where we want to bring in equity into this, where it make it affordable for South African researchers to be able to publish, you know, these high costs. One open access journal, for example, can cost up to 60,000 Rand with the current exchange rate. We recently had seen at Stellenbosch University, there's one faculty who had published in one of the journals, well, probably a couple of journals, and for 6, the cost of that was nearly 240,000 Rand. And we worked out just for some of these, for the agreements that we've already signed, in terms of how much we actually paying currently for open access. If we had to publish in all this open access, it will cost us around 60 million Rand just to publish those, to pay for those APCs. So the ones that we're looking at this year are the 6 that you see there: American Chemical Society, IOP, Oxford Journals Online, and then the other 2 big 5, Science Direct and Springer Nature. So we're currently in the process of negotiating then transformational agreements with these publishers to be implemented in 2023. And again, so that it includes basically the subscription cost, including paying for APCs, at least for the first part, in the hybrid journals, but hopefully we would also be able to include the gold open access journals in the 2nd or 3rd year. And then phase 3 are the following 3, and these are based on the renewals as they come up for SANLIC, that where the current agreement expires at the end of the 3-year period, and now we're negotiating for the next 3 years, and those are the 3 phases. So the next phase 3 is Royal Society and Taylor and Francis. Please, next slide. And that basically gave us a sort of a summary of our plan. So what is important here is we want to make sure, and the key issues, as I have already alluded to, it's really that we want to maintain. Sorry, I just need to move because I can't see that part of my screen very well. As I said, that we want to maintain or improve read access to scholarly information. We're looking at the ability to publish full and immediate open access in our venue of choice. We want to contain or reduce cost. And when we do say contain here is that, you know, we talked about cost neutral, that at least we should not pay more that we currently pay for the subscriptions that all the libraries up till now had paid to. But however, we do want it to include then the APCs for in terms of what we currently eligible for, or we want to reduce the cost for that. And then lastly, the inclusivity and social justice must be core in that. The next slide. Okay, so maybe if you could just go back to the previous one. Yeah, I just want to add a little bit more on this one. So here we have to consider the also, and we're working very closely, and we have provided input also in the South African National Open Science Policy. There is a draft policy that has been shared. There were workshops, you know, with various stakeholders. And as I indicated, so it's SANLIC, but we also work, of course, you know, with the other partners. There's, of course, CHELSA in terms of also representing the university libraries as well, focusing on specific access. And of course, we have some, the colleagues will also speak later on about this. But in terms of the open access, the National Open Science Policy, And it is really to ensure that open access, that an open access model that makes publicly funded scientific research publications open to all researchers, institutions, and companies for consultation online, free of cost or other access barriers. The desire is really, the desired outcome here is a change in scientific culture and practice to increase the reach of those who benefit from science. So the science policy states that as open as possible and as closed as necessary. So the ones that will stay closed should be where it is absolutely needed, it is necessary, but we want to achieve everything open as much as possible. And then the principles address 4 critical objectives. First of all, as I've indicated, and as you can see, and I'm starting sort of with the last one there, inclusivity and social justice. Our constituencies' reading access to scholarly information should be maintained or improved. Of course, we want to enable our authors, our researchers, and our institutions to publish full and immediate open access in their journal venue of choice without author-facing charges. And lastly, we want to contain or reduce the reading and publishing costs amongst participating consortium members. Next slide. So if we look at this slide, sorry, I just need to move this a little bit again so that I can see the full screen. So if you look at this slide, and here it's really just to show you what is the impact so far, and what is you know, how will this benefit our researchers. So in terms of those ones, the 6 that I've already indicated to you, that we have signed and have implemented. In the case of Wiley, it shows in terms of how many journal titles South African researchers are now able to publish in free of charge in terms of APCs, and there's about 1,364,000. And then this agreement say that for 2022, because again, this is based on, you know, the number of open access publications South Africa had in the year prior to this agreement. But in the case of Wiley, they also increase the number of, so they, I can't remember exactly how many, but they increased the number of articles that we would have been eligible for. And then in 2023, the agreement, it is also increased to more, the cap, because we're also working on the basis that more people will actually publish. Now that they don't have to worry about who's going to pay for it. And by 2025, they will cap it at 1,806. And here, in the case of Wiley, we did not allocate that article entitlement per institution, but we said it is on a first come, first serve basis, which means really no institution, no researchers, it doesn't matter from which institution you're coming, would be able to publish. But of course, if you wait until we've reached the cap of 823 for 2022, then it means that you will have to then start paying for your APC. So the sooner people publish and submit their articles, you know, then they would definitely benefit from this. So we don't see yet that we will reach the cap for 2022 so far. Then, as we can also see in terms of the charges, SAGE, again, there in the total number of journals in which we our researchers can now publish free of charge is 920, and then there's also 18 for IMAC, the engineering journals. Emerald 259, Cambridge University Press 330, ACM now fully gold open at 55. And in terms of the Royal Society, there are about 8 titles in which our researchers can now publish free of charge. So the estimated value of all these negotiated article entitlement across all 6 agreements is $26 million over the duration of the agreements. So what we're saying, the cost of our researchers now not being able, and this was hard negotiations, I just have to say, in the case of Wiley, this is the first type of agreement that they have done with a country, understanding the needs and that also the differentiation between us and other countries. So it is a major achievement that SANDLIC had done here. And if you consider 26 million, so I've sort of worked it out, it comes to about I think the last time I worked it out, it's over 430 something, 36 million rand. Because if you take the average that you would use for APCs, that is basically what the value of what is now included in our subscription fees. And in some cases, it was with a very limited amount that an increase in some cases with no increase in our subscription funds. Next slide. So just in terms, before I come to why in the case of Wiley, or maybe I should just mention, in the case of Wiley, there was a specific in terms of our social justice principle, there was a specific and Wiley had offered this to us. It's also very much, and it will be customized according to our particular needs, because in the first round of negotiations, Wiley had indicated based on their analysis that South African, there's a high number of rejections of submissions in the Wiley journals. And as part of this agreement, they wanted to ensure that now that we have this benefit and this opportunity to publish basically free of charge in the hybrid journals for the first year, and of course that will include gold in the following years, and also the Hindawi journals, that that they had actually, as part of the agreement, agreed and proposed that we have what we call the Wiley Author Engagement Program. And this is part of our social justice development program. And we have selected now, there's a board that consists of South African academics and researchers, editors of journals, who are actually working with Wiley, with their experts on covering and the topics that need to, so that we can ensure that our researchers are successful when they submit articles to be published in Wiley. So this is going very well. The program will be rolled out in 2023. There will be a pilot later this year where librarians, as well as some of our researchers, will be able to test the system, to register, to see how it works. And if it all goes well, then it will be rolled out, and all authors from SANDLIC member institutions who would be able, and it doesn't mean if you have Wiley or not, if you're part of the agreement, because there were a couple of institutions who did not participate in the whole program, that has not participated in this particular agreement, but everybody would be able to participate in the program. So those are some of the areas that would be covered: practical training on how to write a paper, practical training on how to respond to peer reviewers and editors, a guide to open access and open science, research integrity and research ethics, the importance of preprinting and how to go about it, making your research discoverable, the role of peer review and how to review a paper, how to be an editor, the publishing process, and publishers as service providers. And as you can see here, so it wasn't a case where we had also just gone and say, okay, you give us this. We had now settled on an agreement, but we are serious. It is about growing our scholarly output in South Africa. We don't want to be just, published and what people regard perhaps not as necessarily standard, of a high standard, but we want to ensure that we become part and that we of the mainstream publishing, and therefore we're looking at these tools to help all our researchers. Next slide. Next one. So just in terms of the uptake of the articles, of these agreements, sorry, of the APCs of the agreement so far, what you can see here on the screen is that early evidence indicates that the transformative agreements, transformational agreements have been highly successful in terms of accelerating the growth of South African open scholarship through transformational agreements. We can see here in terms of ACM, so those were the first three, Cambridge University Press, and then also a SAGE on the next screen, combined. So we have moved now from a situation where over 90% of the output was published in the subscription model without author rights retention, and with only 2% of articles published in hybrid OA, to a situation where only 19% now of the output is now published in the subscription model without author retention, and with 81% of articles published now are in OA with author rights retention. So we can safely say we have really achieved a lot here in terms of how many articles are now being published in open access with author rights retention. Next slide. We're basically coming to the end. So these are the other two, the other three, here specifically looking at Emerald and Wiley. Again, the same here. We can see the number of participants, article published in 2022 to January to June, and that's already at a value of $80,880 US. In the case of Wiley, there we can see also there was a cap number of participants. It started off slowly, but so we have now 127. 159 were submitted, of which 127 were published open access, and that is at a value of $361,840 US dollars, and that's at an average APC of $2,845. Next slide. This just shows also this acceleration of full to full OA. As you can see, again, there's agreements. It just shows you in the different types, and then also the grand total. Next slide. Okay, and there's the corresponding authorship, and that just shows again for the 6 transformational agreements that it actually show, how much we're publishing now in each of those for each of those avenues. And there you can see it also. And that brings me to the end. So I hope this has given you, a broad overview of what SANLIC has been up to. It also demonstrates, I think, we have definitely made significant progress. And we have no doubt through this, in the end of the day, what we want to achieve is to ensure that we accelerate the growth of South African publishers, and of course that we can contain costs, because none of our institutions have funding to continue with this unsustainable funding model that we've had up till now. Thank you. I do have a few minutes to stay if there are any questions. If not, then Daisy can answer it later on. She speaks.
Thank you so much, Ellen. It's always interesting to see the direction everything is taking. Teresa Mofana also says good job from Sunlick, and thanks for sharing. Just a reminder, if you have questions or comments, to put it in the chat. Ellen, I do have a quick question for you. Your take on transformative agreements in terms of, is it quick enough to go to full open access, to take us to full open access? Does it not
is it
create different problems? Yeah.
Okay. So, but just repeat, I missed the one word. Is it too
quick enough? Is it quick enough to take us to full open access? Transformative agreements specifically.
Yeah, I do think it is quick enough. It takes a lot of time to prepare and to get to that point, and it's the only way that we are going to go to fully open access. I can't see any other. So it is probably the only option, and maybe not quick enough from the point of view that, for example, last year we negotiated two or three of the publishers that we negotiate this year. We have actually started last year already, and we couldn't reach an agreement. In fact, there's one that we still had to go with the subscription model for 3 years. Other countries around the world where they had already been successful in negotiating these agreements, it also took them in some cases 2 to 3 years. But you know, in the end of the day, that is probably the only way that we're going to get to everything being fully open access, and that we can force publishers, because the model needs to change. The other problem, just, and again, maybe why I don't think that we would still not get in the next 5 years, in my own view, probably even in the next 5 years, to a fully open access model, is of course still the pricing, and that a lot of the power still lies with the publishers, because they still control really, you know, the amount of APCs, and they are still basically controlling the publishing landscape. So unless researchers, institutions have a complete break, and of course the other way, quick access. So that's on the one hand, on the negative side. On the positive side, as more and more transformation, and as more and more open access journals become fully open access, it also means that, and this is what we raise, for example, in our negotiations, why should we continue to pay this much for read access if so much of the journals are now open? So, you know, again, if libraries want to say, you know, but if 80% of everything is already open, why do we still need to pay? Why do we actually, you should then just have everything open. And I think that is probably the way that is going to go. But then, of course, the publishers will tell us, oh, yes, but we still see an increase in terms of paid subscription. So if the international community, and not necessarily following what is happening in the West, but finding out for the global South, what are the things that we want to see happen? And that is creating, for example, collections that we say in forums where we don't have to go through the traditional, these other publishers.
Thank you. Yes, I see Betty Acer also has a question around, you know, the fair consumption of the allocated, you know, waivers and discounts from the publishers in these transformative agreements. We do have maybe just a few seconds for that, because I'm also interested in that and wanting to know, are you happy? Are you satisfied with the usage of these discounts and waivers. You said that you haven't yet reached that cap with certain publishers. I would have hoped maybe that it's already been reached, you know, to show a bigger uptake in that. So if you can just maybe give a quick thought on that.
Yes. So I actually, we've been looking at the statistics, and the SANDC licensing manager had actually sent us just recently. In fact, I said we will assist with, you know, looking at a dashboard for it, and we're starting to monitor that, and we do want to see, you know, whether you know, we're going to have a challenge with that, and how can we actually ensure that you know, that some institutions are not disadvantaged. Just in terms of how we came to the decision, we have asked all the institutions, the SANDC members, to say these are the various options, and most felt that the majority felt that the best for the start is that we look at the first come first serve. But surely we are monitoring it, and if it does come to that, you know, then we can consider that, and in a way, you know, I would say SANDC could perhaps also decide, you know, if it's a researcher from a, and let me use this in brackets, in inverted commas, a disadvantaged institution that really needs to publish, and maybe we can establish a sort of open access publication fund within SANDC that we, and I haven't discussed this with the board, but it just came to me now, as you know, based on this question, that I could take and say, you know, maybe we need to create some, you know, if we have savings somewhere, and maybe SANDC can do it to assist those institutions.
I think a lot of attendees will remember you saying that. So
yes. Okay.
But Ellen, thank you again, and I completely agree with you in terms of the change that needs to happen in the scientific culture. I mean, for authors, but for publishers as well. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
So our next speaker today is Dr. Nirmal Singh from the Guru Angad Dev Veterinary and Animal Sciences University in India. He has more than 14 years experience of working in libraries. He has been instrumental in the implementation of a learning management system at his university during the COVID-19 pandemic, and also customized the institutional repository of the university to retrieve records by impact factor and NAAS rating. He has worked in projects for the Department of Science and Technology, University Grants Commission, and RKVY worth more than 10 million Indian rupees. He has also published articles in journals of repute by Springer, Sage, Rutledge, Emerald, Taylor, and Francis. Dr. Singh has contributed 4 papers for 3 IFLA World Library and Information Congresses held in Finland, Slovakia, and Greece. And he attended the IFLA WLIC in Athens, Greece in 2019. His subject interests include bibliometric scientometric analysis, network visualization, and user studies. Dr. Singh, we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Cornell, for introducing me in such a nice way. I hope I am audible to all of you.
Yes, you are, and we can see you clearly.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a very good morning, and I also wish you Gui More. So, I think which is an African term for wish. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, I take this opportunity to convey my sincere thanks to the office bearers of Librarian Information Association of South Africa, as well as of CHELSA, for giving me an opportunity to be here with an enlightened community, with a knowledge-enriched community of scholars. So I'm highly grateful to Professor Daisy and Mr. Charlie, who associated with me with this important event today. You would be happy to know that the day of today has a very its own importance in India. Today is the festival of lights in India. People are celebrating Diwali. So this Diwali, this represents the victory of the goodness over the evils. So that is a crucial function. So whole of India is celebrating that function today. So I am quite happy that you have organized this symposium on this crucial day. So the topic of my talk is open educational resources. So during this talk, we will first of all we will talk about open educational resources. Then we will move to the open educational resources initiatives in India. If the time permits, we will also discuss about a few global initiatives in this domain of OER, open educational resources. So the open educational resources, they are of paramount significance for reducing the gaps between information rich and information poor. They are crucial for bridging the gaps between the developing communities and developed economies. And they are crucial for enabling those who don't have access to knowledge, who don't have access to education due to certain reasons, due to one reason or the another. So these have very crucial place. These are pivotal for the societal development, for the development of whole world as a single society together. So in this direction, I have prepared a PPT. I'm going to share that with you. Yeah, Cornel, are you able to see it?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you. So before going to the open education resources, I want to share with you some other open concepts, open things, that is open access. Being library and information professionals, I hope all of you are well versed with this concept. Open access. The open access may be of various types. It may be green open access, it may be golden open access, it may be diamond open access, and it may be black open access. In green open access, the pre-printed, the pre-published versions of the articles that are made available on the repositories for people to access. Whereas in golden access is not free, because if we are accessing it free of cost, it means that somebody as an author of that work, he or she is contributing money for making that work available in the public domain. So in diamond open access, neither the author nor the audience or the viewers, they are not required to pay anything. So that is available for the readers free, as well as for the authors to publish articles in journals. They do not need to pay any money. So it is free for both users as well as authors. In case of black open access, we are able to access the documents in full text, but those are unethically available. So those are not legally provided. They are in violation to the norms. They are in violation to copyright laws. So similarly, there is a concept of open content, open course, where the courses are offered. I think all of you know about Coursera. Many of the courses over there are available freely, particular to the developing countries. And there is concept of open education and e-learning, and then comes open educational resources, which is supplementary to open education. So what open access, open educational resources means? Actually, UNESCO, this term, open educational resources, it was coined by UNESCO in 2002. So during the forum, where this term was coined, the UNESCO defined it as learning, teaching, and resource material in any format. Any format means in digital format or any other format, and medium that reside in public domain or are under copyright. open education resources doesn't mean that they are free from copyright. They obviously they have certain copyrights, but under an open license. So that permit no cost access, reuse, repurpose, adaptation, and redistribution by others. It means open education resources are also covered under certain copyright laws, but under open license. So on the other hand, users are able to use them. They are free to use those resources. They are free to distribute those. They are free to modify, provided that has been permitted under that concerned license. In 2019, UNESCO revised the definition. It again gave another definition, according to which OER is teaching, learning, and research material that make use of appropriate tools. Appropriate tools means the digital tools, the tools and technology for distributing the knowledge, for disseminating the knowledge, such as open licensing to permit their free reuse, continuous improvement. In earlier definition, this was not available. This word continuous improvement was missing. Now, according to the recent definition of UNESCO, the open educational resources are available for continuous improvement so that the users, they may build upon other works, upon the existing works, provided the license permit that, and repurposing by others for educational purpose. So these are not for usually not for commercial purposes. These are for educational, research, and teaching purposes. The William and Flora Hallett Foundation has also given a similar definition of open educational resources, which is almost similar to that. And the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, it also defined OER. It's as digitized material. Earlier, in the initial definition that was coined around 2 decades back in 2002, the UNESCO referred to as material in any format or medium. But if you see the definition of Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, it has clearly mentioned the digitized material, because the mass distribution, the bulk distribution of content is possible with digitization only. And today we cannot think about dissemination of knowledge without digitization. So even if you see even the small libraries, they are reaching out to their users using technology. They have their own websites, they have their mobile applications, their digital repositories. So we cannot ignore the influence of digitization. So it has included the term digitized material in the definition, that is offered freely and openly for educators, students, and self-learners to use and reuse for teaching, learning, and research. According to OER Commons, OER or open education resources are teaching and learning material that are freely available online for everyone to use, whether you are an instructor, student, or self-learner. In this definition, the OER Commons has mentioned the stakeholders who are going to get benefit from the open educational resources. It includes teachers, students, self-learners, as well as the contribution to OER, because their work are supposed to get more and more visibility when they are available in open domain. We will have a quick look at the chronological development of OER. Though the term OER, Open Education Resources, was coined in 2002 by UNESCO, and but the works pertaining to this have taken place a decade back. The term learning objects, it was coined in 1994. Then the term open content came in 1998. Even before the term this open educational resources was coined, the first global OER initiative that happened in 1999. Previously, it was known as Connexion, but now it is known as OpenStax. So it is one of the prominent global OER initiatives. The MIT, that institution that also opened its courses as courseware for masses in 2002, and it was a big revolution in courseware, open courseware of that time. So even now, it is offering, I think it has offered more than 2,400 programs. courses pertaining to different programs. So OER was coined by UNESCO at its forum on the impact of open courseware for higher education in developing countries in 2002. And among us, these developments, one of the major developments in OER is the Cape Town Open Education Declaration. So it happened, the meeting, the conference and the program that happened in 2007. In 2007 in Cape Town. So it was organized by Shuttleworth Foundation and Open Society Institution to promote the open resource technology and teaching practices in education. So this is the platform where the scholars they discuss, they brainstorm that the findings that the research, that the generation of knowledge that is based on the public money, that is based on the public funding, so that why that should not be put in public domain. So this was the forum where the idea of making available all public funded research available as in open domain that got emergence. So in that forum, in that declaration, three major strategies were identified to increase and reach the impact of open educational resources. First one was educator and learning. Educator and learning as an individual, their participation, their active participation in emerging open education movement was required. According to that, they are required to create and use open resources, considering as an integral part of this in their education. So second major strategy was open educational resources. The educators, authors, institutions, publishers, they were called upon to release their resources in open domain so that the masses may access and utilize those. And third one was the open education policy, so that the institutions, the policymaker, those who are involved in policy matters, they may be encouraged to accelerate the open education resource publishing, to make their works available in open domain. Similarly, this Paris Open Education Resource Declaration 2012, this was also a crucial step in promotion of open education resource movement globally. If you see this Cape Town Open Education Declaration, till now, more than 3,000 individuals and more than 360 institutions, they have signed the declaration for being the stakeholders, for being the contributors, for being the partners in open education resource movement. The Paris Open Education Declaration, this was actually UNESCO in 2012. They in collaboration with the Commonwealth of Learning, they organized a Congress. During that Congress, it was this declaration was finalized. So it is also known as Paris Declaration on Open Education Resources. So this declaration, it urges the governments to make the policies to promote use of open access resources and make those available publicly. In addition, it also advocates the suggestion of the major strategy of Cape Town Open Education Declaration, that the research funded by the public money should be made available to the masses free of cost. So in this Paris Open Educational Declaration, the 10 points were decided upon, they were finalized upon, through which the countries can realize the benefits of the open education resources, like awareness on use of open education resources, encouraging the research on open education resources, etc. So the open education resources is a very wider term. It covers various information resources. It takes in ambit the full courses, the course material, modules, complete modules pertaining to particular programs, learning objects, digital objects, and open textbooks, openly licensed videos, test software, and any other tool, material, or technique used to support access to knowledge. So this is very exhaustive term. Actually, usually most of the open educational resources, they are licensed under Creative Commons. So under Creative Commons, different sort of licenses granting different permissions, they are they are made use of in the respective works, which signifies that, which represents that the extent of utilization or the extent of modification that can be executed on a particular work. If you talk about Creative Commons, I think all of you are aware about Creative Commons license. In 2001, Lawrence Lessig and Eric Elder, they designed the Creative Commons license to provide an alternative to the copyright laws, so that the rights of both the authors as well as of the users may be protected. Rights of the user in the sense that they may grant the license to the other people for utilizing their work, which is available in open domain to the extent they think appropriate. The users are also safe while using the works that are licensed under Creative Commons, because they get free from the fear of copyright infringement, because when they are using the Creative Commons work, they have no botheration about that. It would get violated if they exercise certain changes, or if they exercise the utilization and distribution within the limits of the license, open license. So in fact, it is a balance protecting both the authors as well as the users of the works. So most of the work that is available for distributing free, for remixing, adaptation, as well as building upon the other material based on the existing works in any format, any other format, provided the user of that work gives credit to the originator of the work, that the author of the work is given due attribution. Similarly, some works also allow the commercial use. You can see the insignia against each and every, I'm sorry, it was not enlarged at the time. You can see the insignia against each entitlement, each extent of freedom that represent the level of the freedom which can be exercised over work. Some of the works, they don't allow derivation or adaptation of the work, and in some cases only non-commercial use is permitted, whereas in some cases commercial use is also permitted. So this open education resources, they work on 5R activities. First, including retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute. Retain means the user, the student or the learner or any other that is using OER, he or she is free to store it, to control the copies of the content, to make duplicate copies, to manage it in his or her own way. In case of reuse, one can actually, this right permits the free uses of the material, where one can use it in classroom, one can use it in group discussion, one can use for giving demonstration to other people. So like this is about uses of the OER contents. Revise is the law that permits to adjust, adapt, or modify or alter the content itself, like making translation of the work, improving better work from that, making improvements to the existing body of knowledge through revised work, like that. In remix, one can collect the information, the bits of information from different sources, and can develop a remix by incorporating the content into mashup. Redistribution is it is the right for distribution of the work protected under open license to the other people, like giving a copy of the content to a friend, sharing through email like that. Open education resources are very supportive to sustainable development goals of the UN. I hope all of you know about the sustainable development goals, which are about encouraging the different governments, different nations to make policies, to take actions for ensuring the peace and prosperity for each and everyone on the globe. So this OER, actually, as per literature, OER supports these 6 SDGs given over here. So I could identify these 6 SDGs, which to which OER is very clearly supportive. But if you talk indirectly, open educational resources are supportive to each and every SDGs of UN, because open education resources, they promote education, they promote knowledge, they promote equity for all, they promote quality of education for all, for bridging the gaps wherever they exist. So without knowledge, without being information empowered, attainment of the SDGs is not possible. So I personally feel open education resources are supportive to each and every sustainable development goal. If we talk about these 6 SDGs, first one is quality education for all. Obviously, the purpose of open education resources is promotion of quality education. These aim to take the quality education material to the users, to the people, to the populace for their for improving their quality of life, for their social upliftment. These also aim at bridging the gender gaps. So these are useful for both genders. So I think in the nations, if in certain nations there may be certain problems, the society may be biased towards a particular gender. So the main aim of OER is to support the education of both genders, so that the both men and women, they became information empowered. They could speak about their rights. And they also aim to enhance the scientific research and innovation, especially in developing countries, because sometimes in developing countries, people are not able to pay huge amounts for having access to knowledge, when the information and knowledge that is available in the open domain, so that can be accessed by anybody. So these reduce ultimately by developing the education, by developing gender equality, by enhancing the research and innovation, obviously the inequalities get reduced. So these ensure access to information and protect fundamental freedom, because when one is empowered, one is knowledge enriched, he or she would be able to speak about his or her fundamental freedom. So these instigate for the partnership for goals, because attainment of SDGs, that is a collective effort. So OER support these goals. So these bind the different nations, different communities, different organizations for building up a knowledgeable society. There are different 4 areas where research can be conducted in OER. One is about cost. So in cost means determining the cost effectiveness of open educational resources. Ultimately measuring the impact of open educational resources on the users. So on in terms of reducing cost of education. So this is the area that can be explored. Next is outcome, the impact of open education resources on student learning, how influential they have been, and uses the impact of and practices around customization of open education resources. This is related to certain metrics from the websites, how these are customized to make these useful for the users. About perceptions, this is behavioral kind of studies, user studies, like how they perceive the effectiveness of open educational resources. So these are the areas where research can be conducted. So I think directly or indirectly, we have discussed many advantages of the open educational resources. So obviously these expand access to learning. They offer the ability to modify the course material, enhancement of the course material, and so on. I hope we are running out of time, so I'm skipping these. There are certain challenges also, because quality reliability is a cause of concern, because we cannot trust each and every information that is available free to us. So first of all, we have to establish its authenticity. This is applicable in case of open education resources also. There is a limitation of copyright property protection, because certain material that are available under patent, that can be covered under patent. So these are not included over here in open license, because it all depends upon the intention of the creator, which work he or she wants to make available for the public, or which or he or she wants to retain for publishing in some other licensing scheme, so that he or she may get the financial benefits too. Technology issues also there, because digital divide is existing not only within the countries, it also exists between, within the countries also. It is not between the countries, but also within the countries, because in certain parts of the country, in the remote areas, people don't have access to mobile phones or to the digital gadgets. Their primary focus is on earning bread and butter only, because the situation makes them to fight for their survival only. So we cannot, how can we expect them to have digital technology for accessing content in the digital format, unless they have necessary infrastructure, basic infrastructure. So language is also a problem, because majority of the content in open education resources is available in English language only. So as far as the vernacular languages are concerned, the people always get deprived. You know, in India, there are more than 200 recognized languages being spoken by different in the different corners of the country. So in that situation, I think in Africa also it's a multilingual country. So in such case, this problem further gets accelerated, because the people who are not well versed with English, they will face a problem in accessing and utilizing OER. So language is a big barrier. So awareness within educational institutions, that is also a challenge, because so which can be catered by the librarians, because when they spread the awareness within their institution, they make their students, they make their stakeholders familiar with the open educational resources. Obviously, this problem can be overcome, this challenge can be overcome, and the utilization of OER will get enhanced. Here I have mentioned some open education resource initiatives in international scenario. If we talk about China, the material from 750 courses is made available by 222 university members of the China Open Course Resources for Education Consortium. So this is the website link of that consortium is given. You can check it from there. They offer 750 courses. Contributed by 222 universities. In Japan also, the Japanese OCW consortium is there, Open Courseware consortium is. So there 400 courses are available from 19 member institutions. In France also, Paris Tech Open Courseware project, 800 education resources from around 100 teaching units of 11 universities, from 100 departments of 11 universities, that is available for perusal of the stakeholders. In UK, over 80 open education resource projects have been released. They have released several information resources. In Africa also, Open Education Resource Africa is prominent, that is developing and disseminating open education resources for higher education institutions, faculties of health, teacher education, and agriculture. So now we come to some initiatives, open education resource initiative in India. The first one among these is National Repository of Open Education Resources. This is actually developed by National Council for Education Research and Training, NCRT. this is developed under the aegis of the Department of School Education and Literacy, Ministry of Human Resource Development. Under this consortium, various type of information resources, including the textbooks, the videos, audios, and interactive material that is available for students of class 1 to class 12. So all that information is available to them at their disposal in full text from a single website, NCERT, from the website of NCERT, National Council of Education Research and Training. This is the link to the National Repository of Open Educational Resources given from the Ministry of Education, Government of India, which is the Ministry of Human Resource Development. The second major initiative is NPTEL, that is National Program on Technology Enhanced Learning. This is a very, very important repository, you can say repository of courses available in India. And this is the, not only in India, it is the biggest online repository of the world for courses in engineering, basic sciences, and selected humanities and social science subjects. So it hosts, it has more than 1.5, it has more than 750 million views till now. And its educational channel is also available on YouTube, and its channel is subscribed by 1.5 million plus viewers, and it has more than 24,000 plus hours of video content under different courses, under different titles. So this is the most successful library of peer-reviewed educational content in the world. In fact, this National Program on Technology Enhanced Learning, it was developed under the aegis of the Ministry of Human Resources by 7 Indian Institutes of Technology. Indian Institutes of Technology are the premier institutions offering courses in engineering, in technology, in social sciences also in India. Even the CEO of Google, Mr. Sundar Pichai, he's also an IITian. So it has these IITs have produced big personalities in IT sector. So the course content of this NPTEL, the courses, even the courses of NPTEL, these are offered by IITs along with the Indian Institute of Sciences, Bangalore. So it enables one to pursue the course in all major branches of engineering and physical sciences at undergraduate as well as at postgraduate levels.
5 minutes, Dr. C.
Yeah, sure. So we have already discussed this. I'm going to just show you how many initiatives the Government of India has made. SWAYAM is also a crucial source of information. This is the repository developed by Government of India a few years back. Anyone can pursue the courses at different level, at graduate level, at postgraduate level, using SWAYAM, and those are also recognized by Government of India. And even the credits earned by pursuing a course at SWAYAM, that can also be transferred to the regular educational programs. So in India, in case of teachers, regular teachers, they are required to complete certain refresher courses, orientation programs, refresher courses after a certain time for their career advancement. So if somebody registers on SWAYAM and completes that course online, that is also given due recognition by the institutions. So these are very valid courses. You know about Khan Academy. This was started by an American in India. This is available for school education. The people are using it for school education from beginning from class 1 to class 12. And this is very popular in India, Khan Academy. And all the courses available over here are offered by Khan Academy can be accessed freely by each and everyone. So Actually, in order to meet the financial expenditure, it is getting financial support from different organizations, including from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Tata Trust, and so on. Shod Sindhu is another important venture of the Government of India. This is the repository of thesis. More than 390,000 theses are now available over this. In other terms, I can say around 0.4 million theses, full text theses. Those are available through this Shodh Ganga program, Shodh Ganga institution repository. More than 544 institutions, the universities, they have signed an MOU with the InfluNet Center, which is the center responsible for developing this and for managing this repository. So when a student submits his or her thesis, that gets uploaded on this Shodh Ganga, so that each and everyone can know about what recent research is going on in India. In addition, Government of India also developed a National Digital Repository, which is a gigantic source of information. It caters to the information needs of different level of users, beginning from school students to the researchers. So it offers variety of contents for the users. It offers content for schools, for engineering, for scientists, for the scholars of humanities, for literature. Though it also offers data sets. In addition, it also offers the content for preparing the students for competitive examinations. So this is very popular in India. This is National Institute of, National Institute of Science, Communication and Information Resources. It is now renamed as National Institute of Science, Communication and Policy Research. It has its own portal that is known as NoGate, where you can find information about installation of different software, like installation of DSpace, installation of Koha, and so on. In addition, it offers, this website also hosts the full text of various journals. E-Gyan Kosh is, this is the initiative of Indira Gandhi National Open University. All open courses that are offered by the university are available over here, E-Gyan Kosh portal. eView, it is an initiative of a private university, Amrita University. This is the robust software, an excellent software which can be used for integrated learning management, and as well as for imparting day-to-day classroom. In addition to managing day-to-day classroom activities, it can also be used for virtual conferences, virtual seminars, etc. This is the course that is being offered by our university, my institution. I'm working in veterinary university. Our institution has developed MOOCs. So the pig farmers, they can register over the MOOCs and can pursue the courses free of cost. So these were the major Indian initiatives. Now we can have a glimpse at global initiatives also. One of them is OER Commons. And then the Open University, OSS summaries. These are the one-page summaries of the articles that has been published in various journals, indexed in Social Science Citation Index and Arts and Humanities Citation Index. So this is also a crucial source of information. So this is the gateway. This is the search engine for finding out the open education resources, OER Meta Finder. So you can use it to find the open education resources. It conducts search in 22 databases simultaneously. So this is very crucial. OpenStax, one of the oldest open education resource initiatives of the world. Then Open Textbook Library is there. It offers open access to more than 1,100 open textbooks. So LibreText is there. So these are some of the initiatives that I have listed over there. So this is one more crucial source of information, that is multimedia education resource for learning and online technologies, teaching, sorry. So it offers access to around 0.1 million information resources. It has around 2 lakh registered members, and this is also a gigantic source of information. So these are the disciplines where these are the type of material which has been facilitated by this method, like animation, collection, case studies, articles, online courses, and so on. Community College Consortium for Open Education Resources is also a crucial source of information. Then OER is also there. You can go to its website and check about it. It provides information about the various ongoing activities, various courses that are being offered globally, which are available in open domain. So Teaching Commons is also there. And then there is Connect OER. A lot of information sources are available. Writing Commons, this is very crucial for the stakeholders of involved in writing. And this is crucial for writers, researchers, and knowledge workers. So MIT Open Course is obviously one of the biggest open courseware. And ROAR is repository of open access repositories. You can registry of open access repositories. You can check it. Around 4,700 repositories are listed over there. Then there is OpenDoyer, that is open directory of open access and directory of open access repositories. So it also lists around 4,900 institutional repositories globally. So these do not provide access to both these DOER as well as this ROAR, Registry of Open Access Repositories. They do not provide access to content directly, but these are the repositories. So they will take to the websites where the information is available. Then PubMed Central is you know that this is supported by this provides access to the information resources from National Library of Medicine. OER Knowledge Cloud is there. Then directory of open access books, you know, this is very crucial source of information where you can access the books that are available in open domain. DOAJ, it provides access to more than 18,000 journals that are available in open domain. In addition to providing access, it also provides you brief information about whether it charges author publishing charges, or about quality indicators of the journals also, from where you can decide whether you want to go with that or not. So I think we are already running out of time. In final, I would like to conclude my presentation with the remarks that open education resources, they have their importance in the society because they lead to the increased exposure for the authors as well as for the readers. For authors, because when the work is available in public domain, when the full text is available, they are likely to get more and more readership, more and more citations. And for the readers, obviously, it is very pivotal to have access to large amount of scientific or scholastic knowledge, which is facilitated by open education resources. So these lead to generation of greater knowledge within the communities and speed up the development. Obviously, the development activities, they are based on the speed of the availability of the or the exchange of knowledge, to which OER are a big booster. And these facilitate the extended access to learners without the barriers to access and economic constraints, because each and everyone can access these free of cost, and it enables the learnings to have meaningful and affordable access opportunity for lifelong learning. OER are crucial not only for students, these are useful for each and everyone for their lifelong learning. And these supplement the principles of open learning, because ultimately the aim is to facilitate, to supplement open learning and open education for eradicating the inequalities globally. So thank you so much for listening to me very patiently.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. We really appreciate it. In the chat, many happy Diwalis from colleagues, and thank you for an informative presentation. Yes, colleagues, we will be sharing the presentations with you as well. Dr. Singh, are you available to stay so that we can ask questions later, or do you have to go?
Colonel, actually, I have shared with you that today is the biggest festival of India, and this is the Festival of Lights, and people are celebrating that. Even before joining this symposium, I was in my fields and lighting the lamp salt over there. So I'm really very sorry. Actually, I wanted to be a part of this program, and I want to stay over here, but I have to go because I have to join my family for the function.
Absolutely, absolutely. We just want to thank you again, and thank you so much for all the information that you're sharing on your slide, all the different resources. I know I can't wait to dig into them, and especially your own initiative, language-specific initiatives that we obviously also want to look at. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for your kind words. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, what we will do is, as mentioned in the chat earlier, if there are any questions that we have been unable to answer, we will pose it to our speakers and send it out later. So I'm very happy to introduce our next speaker, Prof. Daisy Selimatsela. She is the university librarian at University of Witwatersrand. She previously served as the Executive Director, Library and Information Services at UNISA, and Acting Vice Principal for Research and Innovation, Executive Director, Knowledge Management Corporate at the NRF. She is an appointed Professor of Practice of Knowledge Management of the University of Johannesburg. Her role in academic citizenship involves serving on international boards of directors of CODATA, the International Science Council, Research for Life and ORCID, and the Confederation of Open Access Repositories. At a national level, she serves on the board of directors of the Information Training and Outreach Center for Africa, SUNLIC, and she's also the chairperson of both CHELSA and the South African National Committee of CODATA through the NRF. She also previously served on the board of the National Library of South Africa, Council for Library and Information Services, and Council of National Archives of South Africa. She served on the editorial board of Committee on Data for Science and Technology, the Data Science Journal, and is currently on the editorial board of both Global Change Research, Data Publishing and Repository and Preservation, Digital Technology and Culture Journal. Daisy is the recipient of the 2016 and 2019 Knowledge Management Leadership Award by the Global Knowledge Management Congress and Awards in association with World Education Congress and the first International Conference on Knowledge and Innovation Management, Babcock University. She is also an alumnus of Hers Hesse and Hers Bryn Mawr College in Philadelphia. Daisy, we look forward to listening to you.
Thank you, colleagues. I'm going to switch off my video because we get load shedding here when the generator kicks on, then at least I cannot have that intermittent period. Thank you. Oh, just a second. See your documents. Yes. Thank you, colleagues. I'm going to focus on how we looked at open science in South Africa, especially with the fact that some of us don't know how far we have come as a country addressing the issues around open science and open data. And I think most of us think that the issues around open access started in the last 8 to 10 years, not being aware of the processes that took place that we were not privy to from the library sector, for example. And I just want to share with you and take you through down memory lane on where we are as a country when we look at the open science in Africa and how the Global South-South has actually worked on this process. And that's why when I look at this, I just want us to touch base on the South-South collaboration, the activities that took place to accelerate transition to open science. And this is what I want to share with you. I don't know how many of you are aware of this process that I'm going to take through you. I just want to highlight that for you to be aware of the transition, that for us in South Africa, it's not a new thing when we talk about open science. It started way before, it started around 1996, 97, and the discussions in South Africa then unfolded in 1999 when Core Data, and you can see they have a screen, an emblem or logo of Core Data, which is a committee on data, and it's part of the International Science Council. And to be part of the International Science Council, the Department of Science and Technology, what we call now the Department of Science and Innovation, is the main body in South Africa, like other African countries, where the ministries are part of the International Science Council, and each and every country then pays its membership. And the membership for Core Data, for example, in South Africa, it's paid by or through the NRF. It's country membership, and it's very expensive that a particular institution can pay on its own. So it's country membership, and this country membership assists with the bilateral discussions globally with the also International Science Forum. And that's where our researchers and scientists, also data producers, also have to play a role through the membership that's paid through the Department of Science and Innovation through the International Science Council. So how we moved then was that, as I indicated, that in 1999, Core Data then was invited to address the South African Data Archive. And the South African Data Archive started in the 1960s. And through that management meeting that was held to discuss how Core Data at the time could make a contribution towards the operation of the South African Data Archive, which was hosted by the NRF. And this process moved from this CSIR, not CSIR, the one that deals with the social sciences. Then it moved to the National Research Foundation at the time. So what transpired at that meeting was that the then head of SADA, or the South African Data Archive, was then invited to become a full member of the Core Data National Committee. So what happens that when we look at the issues on open data and open science, Core Data has national committees, and South Africa has a national committee, and each and every country has a national committee that gets represented globally. Because then of SADA's involvement in the national committee, there was then a follow-up meeting that took place then in Dakar, in Senegal, Dakar, where Core Data then was actually taking other initiatives in the area of data conservation. And a workshop was held in Senegal, and the focus was on scientific and technical data handling in exchange for development. At that time, sustainable development was not as high on the agenda, on the international agenda, as it is present. And remember, we were then talking about the Millennium Development Goals, but also that was not the focus at the time. Then a paper on scientific and technical data in Southern Africa, the situation in SADC countries, was then delivered. At the time, there was also very few activities in the area of data conservation in SADC countries, with the exception of South Africa. And this is how we evolved on the understanding of open science and open data. Following to that, Core Data held a General Assembly in 2000. And the presentation of Core Data at the Core Data General Assembly was the incorporation or the initiation of a workshop called Archiving for Scientific and Technical Data, which was then held in Pretoria in 2002. This is after the Core Data General Assembly that was held in Beijing in 2000. This workshop in Pretoria in 2002 was attended by about 70 delegates from the region which is SADC and international speakers or experts. And the idea was to provide input on technical aspects of data archiving. And the meeting was co-chaired by Bill Anderson. As some of you might know, Bill Anderson, he used to work with the US Academies of Science, and they are instrumental in writing a number of documents aligning to open data and open access. The topics that were discussed at the time included scientific imperatives, technical imperatives, management around data issues and what countries need to be doing, and the issues around policies. How do we deal with policies in the global south? And I must indicate to you, colleagues, that these topics that were discussed then are still pertinent today, even though the environment is constantly shifting as technology and other priorities and governments change. But it's quite important that we are cognizant that these activities are still in place even today, but what are we doing with it? Following to that, the CODATA General Assembly of 2002 looked at a task group on the preservation of and access to scientific and technical data in developing countries. And this task group then was chaired and initiated by Bill Anderson again and Liu Shuang for the Chinese Academies of Sciences. As you can see, the academies were much more instrumental in dealing with research data and data management and open data as we talk about today. Only 2 African countries were included in the membership of the task group that were looking at preservation of and access to scientific data. And it was only South Africa and Senegal. The other 2 African countries, Nigeria and Cameroon, they were there, but the countries were not committed and were not very active and did not take up any offer to become members as countries or to this task group. The first open data workshop out of the General Assemblies then were held in 2004 in Beijing. And the first task group then was focusing on looking at how can institutions and countries apply the learnings of what needs to happen when we look at data issues, and especially the issues around open data. Only 3 delegates from South Africa were supported, who were then sent to attend this task group meeting in China, in Beijing in 2004, hosted by the Chinese government with the assistance under the auspices of CODATA. Then a follow-up meeting was held in South Africa, colleagues, in 2005. Out of the 2004 meeting in Beijing, in 2005, with a focus on strategies for permanent access to scientific and technical information in Southern Africa, health and environmental information for sustainable development. And you can see that transitioning when we started then shifting the focus on what we need to be looking at in the global south. Out of that workshop of 2005, I'm just giving you snippets here of what recommendations came to the fore that are still relevant 21 years later. Even today, they are still relevant because we have not managed to actually implement most of the things that was talking around in circles as if some of the activities are not happening. The first one that I want to share, which is the need to influence government officials. At least now there's movement, which I'll highlight later. The issues around raising awareness with respect to the value of data, both in the libraries and both with the research and also the data producers. And how do we understand the issues around data stewardship? The long-term access to data in areas such as agriculture and meteorology. And remember, when we talk about agriculture, you look at the issues around the SDGs. We look at the issues around SDGs, SDG 4, for example. That's when you look at the issues around climate. Agriculture is part of food security. So when we talk about climate, we narrate it down and we say, what are we looking at? And for us, agriculture is quite key because it's part of food security. And we also look at meteorology. And when you look at meteorology, what's happening now with the rain? We don't have water, there's water shortage and so forth. And these were the issues that were dealt with 20 years ago. and where are we today? And we're still talking about food security and the issue of, oh, we don't have water scarcity and so forth, which is part of meteorology. And also the data workshops on handling data. How many of us know and understand the process of handling data, let alone data management? The other comment, recommendation that was raised at the time was the issue around a data management academy. That South Africa and in this global South, we need to have a data management academy to look at our processes and to ensure that everyone is streamlined with the understanding, looking from researchers to the data producers and the conduit for data. The other aspect was a directory of core data sets. And how do we handle outreach activities as countries? And also attention to socio-economic data. At the Core Data General Assembly in 2006, the Assembly approved the formation of another new task group on data for sustainable development in SADC countries because of our needs in the South. In 2007, there was a joint workshop which was held between the task group that was focusing on preservation of and access to scientific and technical data in developing countries, together with the task group on data for sustainable development in certain countries. And the intention was to co-create, something of sustainable value in the area or the region, so that it's no longer talk shop, but what do we put on the table? And the first activity was organizing a workshop in May. That workshop was held on the 14th and 15th of May. And it was organized in collaboration with the following bodies: the International Scientific Union Regional Office for Africa, which we called ICSU Regional Office for Africa, the Core Data Task Group on Preservation of and Access to Scientific and Technical Data in Developing Countries, the South African National Committee for Core Data, which is the mother body being paid through DSI and the NRF, and the United States National Committee for Core Data, as we needed to learn lessons from how the US then is dealing with the issues at hand on open data. And the National Research Foundation as the funding body regarding memberships of national committees. Then the task group on data sources at this initial meeting had a direct outcome that links to the preservation workshop held in South Africa in 2005. And the report is available on the Core Data website, where you can see what transpired and what was the outcomes of that. And the activity one continued. The workshop then, colleagues, was to consider main recommendations from the first workshop and also designate appropriate officials in SADC to actively support the task groups that were focusing on data sources initiatives, on initiatives of regional interest, whether it's on climate change and so forth, and to also promote mutual reinforcement within the converging goals of International Science Council, SADC, NEPAD, and in order to leverage resources, and to also establish a work plan for the task group that was focusing on data sources for 2007 to 2008. Activity 2 was for the task group on data sources that focused on what has it done. And it termed this an after action review that took place the week of the 14th February 2008 in Pretoria. The task group then at this first meeting held in conjunction with the first African Digital and Information Curation Conference. And this conference was in collaboration with NEDIC, if most of you know about NEDIC. And this was the first conference that was held to focus on data curation issues. The objectives was to prioritize recommendations of the May 2007 conference in Pretoria, a workshop, and determine also actions for the period going forward to 2008. and to also ensure that the recommendations that are highlighted in priority 1 to develop a database of data resources in Africa. And I'll tell you a little bit more about this database of data resources in Africa. When we talk, for example, as information specialists or professionals, we talk as if there's nothing on the ground, and open access and open data, it's new. It's not new, it has been there. It's just that it depends where you operate. And the recommendation, this recommendation to look at the objectives was executed in 2 phases. Phase 1 with timeframes of Feb 2008 to September, and was looking at what the extension of South African Data Archives, SADA, which is hosted by the National Research Foundation, and to also look at the directory of data producers in Africa, in South Africa, meaning you are extending the South African Data Archive to include also a directory of who are the data producers in Southern Africa. But this will also harvest all the data activities in Africa. And the idea was to have the International Science Council and CONDATA as the front end in supporting and providing tools and supporting that regard. And to design and distribute questionnaires and survey to populate the database, which were done. Activity 2 was also looking at how the first African Digital and Information Curation Conference and its workshops that took place, how do they then link to the discussions that were to the place to the fore? For example, there was Dr. Alfonso Dubi from Kenya, who focused on oceanographic data and information initiatives in Africa as a scientist dealing with World Health Organizations and so forth. And Paul Yulia from the United States of America Academies focused on information gulags, intellectual state jacks, and memory holes. And here it was much more around what's happening out there when you look at digital data, the deposit of data, and the handling of data sets. And Daisy, myself, I looked at the preservation. I chaired a workshop session looking at the preservation and sharing of African research data and related documentation. And remember, this was in 2008. And we also have reports available on that. And I just want to show you what the database looks like. The CODATA database on database of data resources in Africa. This is a snapshot of what the database looked like and the input on the database and the aim of the database, what was it meant for. And you can see there the links there. We have agriculture, earth and marine science, humanities, economic sciences, biological sciences, arts, and so forth. And this is a database of data resources in Africa linking to the South African Data Archive. And it also links the data from our statistical association, Statistics South Africa. And you also, that it's just a follow-up stream that I wanted to show you, linking also the institutions. There you can see the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, River State Ministry of Budget and Economic Planning in Port Harcourt in Nigeria. These are the data sets that were deposited. A typical example of what then you will see covered with the metadata. From this one is from the CSIR Data Center for Oceanography, and you can see the metadata on the side. And this is the database of data sources in Africa, the concept and the survey as it went out. And this is what the objectives and who were the members, which I'll show with you, whom some of you know. And these are the members who were party to this development. And you can see we have meteorologists here. One meteorologist is at the back there. And here you have a Professor Sentu, one of our colleagues in academia. And we also have our colleague, Professor from Namibia, who's also involved in data sets, and Professor Odido Mika and colleagues from across African states. And also the CSIR are involved here. And Professor Rousseau, who most of you might have known, they were the forefathers in our librarianship profession. And he was also instrumental in driving the core data activities in Southern Africa. And these were the bodies that were responsible ensuring that activities are taking place. So when we look fast forward out of the data archive, then we moved to looking at how can we then look at the World Data Center, because there are 50 World Data Centers in the world, which are supported by International Science Council. And for South Africa, we looked at the World Data Center for biodiversity and human health. And the intent for this project was to develop and implement an innovative approach that would be used to successfully create a functioning new pilot World Data Center, looking at us as Africa having the 51st World Data Center in the world. We only have 50 World Data Centers, and this prototype is the 51st one and the first of its kind in Africa. And the specific data center, the human health, the biodiversity and human health data center would then look at biodiversity, human health, and the Core Data General Assembly that was hosted in South Africa in 2010. After the World Cup, we hosted the Core Data General Assembly in Stellenbosch in October. And the concept for the World Data Center was approved there and launched in Cape Town. And the prototype was launched in Cape Town, which is hosted by Sion now. So the World Data Center for Biodiversity and Human Health colleagues got a grant from International Science Council, and Core Data also funded by the proposal and also the task group that funded that. And it was supported by the United States Geological Survey, and some of our colleagues from the University of Pretoria, CSIR, and others actually attended a 6-week training on data management and data stewardship in the US at the US Geological Survey. So they attended that in Reston, in Washington. No, it was not, it was more than 6 weeks. I think it was 8 weeks where they attended to understand how we deal with data and data management. And this was also supported by the UN Gate and ESADC and Core Data Task Group, which you call PAST. And I'm going to share with you what the World Data Center on Biodiversity and Human Health look like, the link. This is the link of the World Data Center for Biodiversity and Human Health in Africa. And it's hosted by Sion. Sion is our South African Environmental Biodiversity or Observation Network. And when you go to the Sion network, you can actually see a number of data sets that are hosted there and how they link to what we are talking today on open data and open science and climate change. And moving forward, I just want to touch base on the processes in Africa, like I've alluded, that now fast forward in November 2012 in Addis Ababa, the first Africa Global Research Council. We have the Global Funding Council for all the funders of the world, but then in Africa, we hosted the first Africa Global Research Council regional meeting. And here it was looking at integrating national science institutions with regional and global initiatives, open access and research integrity. That was in 2012. And what came out of that meeting was to obtain outputs to best practices and standards on research integrity and open access for publications in the African region. And these outputs were then expected to serve as part of the preparations for the Global Research Council, where all the funding agencies meet annually in Berlin in 2013. And the session in Addis Ababa was hosted by TWAS, African Union, the USA National Science Foundation, which is the equivalent of the National Research Foundation of South Africa, and the German Research Foundation. And fast forward going to 2015, 2016, I just want you to look at what happened, transpired in Africa as part of the Global South-South, looking at open science and open data. There was then a NASEC consultative meeting. NASEC is your network of African science academies. And there was that consultative forum on open access. and it looks towards high-level interventions for research and development in Africa. Botswana also held a consultative forum on open access policy development and training. Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwean University Libraries Consortium also held a workshop for a national mandate on open access and management of open research data. And some of you colleagues who are in the midst today were party to these developments. The other one was the CODESRIA involvement. CODESRIA, colleagues, is the Council for the Development of Social Science Research in Africa. And there were also activities around challenges facing the advancement of open access in Africa and the Global South. And they looked at agreed on basic principles for promoting open access in Africa and the Global South. And this was also supported by UNESCO, all these bodies. And we also had our first Open Science Forum that was initiated then by the then Department of Science and Technology, and now it's the Department of Science and Innovation, where we had our first Open Science Forum. And then after that, we've had, every year there's been an Open Science Forum. We've had 3 Open Science Forums. So South Africa had its own Open Science Forum, and it focused on open science and open data. And all the African ministries of higher education and ministers of science and technology were invited to the Open Science Forum to ensure that governments understand the role of open science and open data. And as Africa, how do we have our mandate on the table, and how do governments go and ensure that as part of the bilaterals, because we know that our researchers collaborate, how do we handle this, and how do governments fund their research and innovation as part of their R&D strategy. And at that meeting that was held in Cape Town, it was also to look at the adoption of the open data in a big world, in a big world accord document. And you'll see, I'll share with you now what the accord looks like and then who were involved in that. Also was the launching also of the South African Research Infrastructure Roadmap, SARIR, which was launched also by Minister Naledi Pandor in November also 2016. Then the African Open Science Platform in 2017 was also launched by the ministry and CODATA and the NRF and ASAF to implement the African Open Science Platform. And this is the open data in a big world accord. And if colleagues are not even familiar with this, I would urge that you become familiar with the document. And you can see the representatives here. Geoffrey Bolton, as the chair, was in charge. And I see Geoffrey is also now presenting at the UP, University of Pretoria Open Access. He will be presenting, he's one of the speakers at the UP Open Access. We also have Simon Hudson, who's the ED, Executive Director for CODATA at the moment. And those who know our relationship with the Global South, when we talk about open science, we can't miss out on Glasgow, where Dominic Babini is based in Buenos Aires, that side. And we also have our Chinese Academy of Sciences who were involved in this, and also our own Professor Chilizi Marala from University of Johannesburg, who was representing TWAS in providing input to the document, and the librarians were represented by Maria Musoke from Makerere University, Uganda, who was an EAP representative, and Paul Euler from the US Academics as a consultant, and also Sally Ward was also represented there. So colleagues, I would urge you to familiarize yourself with this, because now we no longer talk about what is open access or what is open data or open innovation. It's what difference are we making on the ground. Progress to date, we now have a draft national open science policy developed by the Department of Science and Innovation, and inputs and contributions have been provided by the stakeholders. And that's why I'm still saying a draft, because they are looking at the inputs. We also have DIRISA and NIKIS that are also hosted through the Miraga Institute. And with DIRISA, that's where we're looking at the issues around fixed share and how do we deal with the research data management. And we also have the African Open Science Platform, which is hosted and led by the NRF. And we also have today a big event taking place for this week, where Core Data is actually looking at international data policy as part of its Fair Convergence Symposium. And this data policy, colleagues, as Core Data, is looking to promote cross-discipline and cross-sector integration of data policy in crisis situations like what we're talking about now, through a reliance on cross-cutting frameworks for data generation, data processing, and data sharing. And here you are looking at the FAIR data principles, and I don't know how many of you are aware of the FAIR principles: data integrity, data stewardship, data ethics, and open science in the context of Core Data's Beijing Declaration on Research Data, the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, including the UNDRS Sendai and the Sendai Convention, and the World Health Organization's Health Emergency and Disaster Risk Management frameworks, including the UNESCO's one, which is key when we talk about open science. Those recommendations on open science are key, the UNESCO's one, and the OECD's Building Capacity for Evidence-Informed Policy Integrated Informed Policy Making, Lessons from Country Experiences, and the International Science Council and UNDR Integrated Research on Disaster Risk, IDR programs, and European Commission Research Area Policy Agenda 2020 to 2024. These are key resources, colleagues, when we talk about open science at this day and age. Like I've indicated, we no longer talk about what is the meaning of open access, what is the meaning of open data, what is the meaning of open innovation. It's now about how do we deal with these situations at a time of crisis, and how data and institutions and governments are harnessing that to ensure that we address the issues on the ground. And fast forward, if you are not aware, there's a World Science Forum that's taking place this year through our Ministry of Science and Innovation. And the World Science Forum is taking place now in December in Cape Town, the 6th to the 9th of December. So we've now transitioned from talking about the national policy, not policy, the Open Science Forum. We're no longer talking about the Open Science Forum. We've moved ahead, and now we're talking about the World Science Forum, which is again taking place in Cape Town. And I wanted to share with you this, colleagues, to say, when we look at open science, open data, open innovation, in Africa, in South Africa, there has been a lot that took place behind the scenes where our own academics, our own researchers have been involved, and some information specialists behind the scenes on driving these processes. So when we talk about these things, we must be aware to say, is it anything new, or are we reinventing the wheel? And I looked at what Nirmal also highlighted, the issue around the collective repositories that they have. And this is what part of this process was looking at, and what other Global South institutions and bodies are doing, are recommending. Thank you very much, colleagues. That was my story to you.
Thank you very much, Prof. We really appreciate it. Tendai MIT UP username left a comment, a great historical narrative showing the development of open access and open science. I concur, most of us information science practitioners are not well grounded in the handling and management of data. And then a question, how far are we with the Data Academy plan you alluded to?
Yes, the Data Academy plan is still in the reporting phase, and something needs to happen about this. Something needs to happen about this. That's all I can say. It's out there, and I don't know whether as part of the policy that's coming up, whether are we going to address that in the forum or what, as part of the policy, yes.
Thank you. Teresa Mufana left a comment, informative presentation. Thanks for sharing these wonderful insights, Prof. Yes, maybe I have just one question based on Tendai's comment as well. If information professionals would like to become more involved and contribute more, what would you recommend? Where should they get involved, apart from within their own institutions?
I think the challenge for us as South African information specialists, we tend to operate in silos and we compete against one another. We don't want to share information. Whatever information you have, it's for you and for your own personal good and to make yourself look good in your CV. And we don't want to be part of the COPs. There is a COP, for example, the NEDIC COP, it's to address all these things that I've highlighted, because the people who are on the NEDIC COP actually know about this process, and they are also representing our own institutions. But like I said, it's that part of how do we share? I do attend these meetings, for example. When I go back to my institution, do I share? Or is it just because it's my job and I must just go back to my table and do my work? I know about all this information and it's for me. And this is where the silo mentality needs to be broken. And that's the challenge that we have. And the second aspect is that we think that our academics don't know. Our academics know because they are involved in these processes as part of their academic citizenship. They are involved and they are roped in the scientific bodies that are, like I highlighted, where funding and membership is paid for from the DSI through the NRF, and researchers are urged to be party to that. And they know about these things. And that is why when we talk about how do we manage research data in our institutions, we tend to think that we are the most knowledgeable, they don't know, but we are not using the right conduit to understand and to go to these databases and see who in my institution, for example, has been involved in this. And I can use that person to actually strengthen the agenda in my institution for data stewardship and so forth.
Yes, I think we have time for one more question. Sibongiseni asks, in line with the growing need for information specialists to become data fluent, are LIS schools reforming to address this issue, or should this be tackled in the working environment?
Yes, now ILS, so there's a difference in the library schools. In our country, in our library schools, remember that our library schools are not practitioners. The academics who are there are not practitioners. And for us in the practice, things are evolving on a daily basis that we all learn by osmosis. We all learn by coming to forums like this, because we're not taught these things in library school. So those who are in academia, in library school, they are teaching what it's part of their curricula that they set for a particular year, and it has to go for the next 5 years or 4 years and so forth. However, even if they can teach you or orientate you towards issues around data management, it's the same as cataloging. Can they catalog themselves? That's the first thing we need to ask ourselves. Can they catalog themselves? I mean, I remember in the earlier years where we had, libraries had already migrated from the mode of cataloging that certain institutions were teaching. And it was mind-boggling to when you get students who are coming and doing their field work to see that they are still using SA mark or whatever when we have migrated from that. So the same applies to the question be asked here about how do we then, our LIS schools in line. They are not in line because most of our people in LIS schools have never been into practice. And in practice, things change every day, things evolve every day. And what needs to happen is that we need to have those short courses that are aligned from the practice side, but are accredited into the academic space, but the practitioners are the ones who should be taking the lead in driving those courses. Because the other thing I want to highlight is that we read most of the publications or theses or dissertations, and we discover that you can pick up this one is not from practice. Even if when you have to mark a certain publication, it's not from practice, it's coming from the theoretical point of view. One example I want to highlight, we talk about blockchain. And some of us have been asked by our institutions to determine how from our libraries are we going to implement metaverse, principles of metaverse technologies and blockchain. And how many of us around the table now understand that? Because when you look at blockchain, what are you looking at? Because it's a ledger and it's looking at data. And for libraries, as information practitioners, how do we apply that? And how do we look at metaverse? So it goes back to that question of, are our LIS schools equipped with it? Frankly speaking, they are not, and they will never be, because things change. If you wait for an activity or a field of specialization to be aligned and accredited and at so many notional hours, it's going to take an approvals again through CNATE, then it goes to CHE and so forth. When that course or module gets accredited, we've already moved. We're now on to another level. Yeah, we won't be talking about metaverse or blockchain. We'll be talking about something beyond that. Yes.
Thank you so much. A comment from Sipetile is a profound message. We learn by coming to these engagements. LI schools are important, but are not always ahead as compared to practice and industry standard, exactly as you said right now. Prof, thank you so much for your time and for your contribution. We truly appreciate it, and the opportunity to get insight as well into everything that you've been a part of for so many years. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you.
So our next speaker for today is Mr. Lazarus Matezerofa. He is Deputy Director and Head of Scholarly Communications, Digital Systems and Services at the University of Pretoria Libraries. His portfolio manages the following functions of the library: open scholarship, digital scholarship, innovation, information technologies, research data management, digitization, makerspace, web management, Libby, the first robot librarian in Africa, and special collections. As if that's not enough, Lazarus is a board member of the Global Networked Digital Library of Thesis and Dissertations, INDI Ltd. He holds a Master's of Library and Information Science degree, and Honours of Library and Information Science from University of Cape Town, and a Diploma in Public Relations from Harare Polytechnic. He's currently studying for a PhD in Information Science at UNISA, focusing on developing an institutional open science framework for the University of Pretoria. Lazarus, over to you. Just unmute, please. You're still muted, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Program Director. And thank you, colleagues who are on this platform. And thank you, Daisy and other presenters that were before me, and for the issues that you have raised with regards to where we are heading, with regards to open science and the role of libraries in our institutions, be it public institutions, our special libraries. We also need them to play a role in facilitation open science, as it were, and every other individual who has the capacity to do something to enable knowledge to be online and to be shared. So I'm going to speak on the importance of open science in addressing our SDGs, and also the role of the library and information services, as it were. So I just pick out these definitions, which I think resonates with the theme of of SDGs and open science in a global world. So UNESCO defines open science as an inclusive construct that combines various movements and practice aiming to make multilingual scientific knowledge openly available, accessible, and reusable for everyone as a way to increase scientific collaboration and sharing of information for the benefits of science and society, and to open the process of scientific knowledge creation, evaluation, and contribution to societal actors beyond the traditional scientific community. So let's mark tradition beyond the traditional scientific community, because I think that's the scope that we need to engage with the SDGs. Then the other definition is the OECD 2015. It further states that the open science encompasses unhindered access to scientific articles, access to data from public research, and collaborative research enabled by ICT tools and incentives. Broadening access to the scientific publications and data is at the heart of open science, so that research outputs are in the hands of many as possible, and potential benefits are spread as widely as possible. So those are the two definitions that I picked, which send us on beyond the traditional scientific community, as well as the role of ICTs and incentives that we are offered by technologies, including the internet. So as a basis for my talk, this is the open science taxonomy framework from Foster. I think as we engage as specialists in these areas, as a university or as an institution, one has to actually look at this tree and find if you can have a checkbox on what of some of the elements or principles that are shared in this diagram. So you will find if you are still on the start, or you are in the midway, or you are close to the end, if you have not checked or ticked most of these things that you see in this diagram, then your open science agenda is still a long way to go. And I think I can speak of my institution and of the things that we have done. And I was also, I want to acknowledge what was shared by the University of Stellenbosch Library Director earlier on, in terms of what they are doing at Stellenbosch. And I think from that aspect, one can actually evaluate where her university is at and what things that they are taking forward to. So the next slide is obviously the one that we should be all looking at, is the South African EU Open Science Dialogue Report 2018. For those that have read it, please do so, because this is the groundwork which formulates our proposed open science policy. So what I picked from that framework is its open science framework, the themes and objectives, which highlights what needs to happen in terms of how you ensure that your open science is driven at an institutional level. So those are the segmented open minds for open science, which each institution should actually be looking at and understanding what that means in terms of setting up an open access strategy within your university. So I said, how will LIASA and CHELSA respond to the South African Open Science Framework? And I think Daisy has already alluded to some of the elements that we need to look at in terms of how we derive the open science agenda. Of course, at an institutional or a national level, some institutions have policies, and the open science policy is coming. And obviously, what you then need to look is the governance and management of these portfolios within your institution, particularly at an academic university. And you will find that the things that the library needs to do in terms of metrics and monitoring and evaluation, and also the human capacity development, of which CHELSA is actually looking at, at the moment as we want to reconfigure the CHELSA ETD platform. So some of those things are coming on board, but we still have a long way to go. You can go to the next slide. Then I also had to look at the actual SDGs themselves and to understand what this means for us. I think libraries, we are not going to be confused by technology, by terminologies of what SDGs are. We have already been working with SDGs in the past. This is our cataloging 101, if I can put it to what this entails. If I look at those diagrams, in our cataloging journey, these are the things our colleagues work with day to day, but we have not been using the theory of the SDGs as it were. So we need to then customize how we are going to catalog, particularly our research outputs that we produce in an institution, and also enable our researchers to understand what this means in terms of their research outputs. So I will touch base on that. And also as libraries, we now need to start harvesting other SDGs that speaks to the context of our researchers, and such that we can provide these resources in the same way they are categorized around the 17 SDGs. And I think I've read about some of the institutions that are actually now starting to benchmark on these SDGs at an institutional level, and sometimes also at a faculty level, because all these 17 principles align to either one or three of our faculties in a universities. So that's one step that we need to do as a library, particularly the faculty librarians, to understand where their faculties actually are anchored around these SDGs. So we can go forward. So understanding the UN Development Agenda, it is highlighted that at the beginning of the new millennium in 2000, there was this convention that came up with the 8 Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs, those that we remember. And those were the same principles which have been magnified to the 17 SDGs that we now have. So that vision lapsed in 2015, and then we moved on to the next slide, please, to the current SDGs. So the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, the main goals focused on the 5 Ps, which was people, the well-being of the people, planet, the protection of the earth and its ecosystems, prosperity, which continued economic and technology growth, peace, security, peace, and partnership, that is improving the international cooperation. That doesn't exclude us as librarians and practitioners, that we need international cooperation for us to move forward in terms of addressing the things that the libraries can do, as well as the other global imperatives that we are supposed to support. So these 5 aspects are interdependent. Therefore, the SDGs demand integrating thinking, as well as integrated approaches to achieving these goals by different stakeholders, including libraries as custodians of the Library 4.0. And for us at UP, as part of our university strategic goal, which is Society 5.0, etc. And I understand some universities have 4IR as their theme, of which their libraries have adopted. For us, we have adopted Society 5.0, but you understand what it means when I look at it in the next slides. So the components of open science, as we look at it, it's open scientific knowledge and open science infrastructure, open engagement of societal actors, and the open dialogue with other knowledge systems. So this is where we derive what we should be engaging with, particularly when we talk of open science. Unfortunately, sometimes we rush into these things without unpacking what these diagrams are actually telling us, particularly at implementation level. Sometimes we rush as libraries to try and, catch up, but without, diagnosing the things that we may need to have at an institutional level before we can start, advocating for these big principles and etc. So if one had to look back, we said we had done open access, but have we ticked all the boxes that resonates with open access? Maybe not. So when we start talking about open science, this is a high drive. So if we're driving as a car that was speeding at, say, 100 kilometers an hour, when you are speaking of open science, you are now driving, your Ferraris or, those motor racing cars. So you are going at a faster speed. So you need to really be able to engage with all the, what is required for you to navigate this highway of high speeding when it comes to open science. We can move to the next slide. Yeah, so what I want us to look at is the values and the principles for open science, and which should be what we should be advocating as librarians at our institutional level. So if we look at the value, they talk of quality and integrity. So what does that mean to the library sector? Collective benefit, equity and fairness. Obviously, I had my colleague earlier on speaking about social justice. So what does social justice mean to equity and fairness at a library level? Diversity and inclusivity, etc. What does those values mean to a library? So if we look back at why libraries were established, all these things, we have often practiced them, but we have never really looked at them at a more theoretical or a more analytical level for us to understand what those values mean. And then we also look at the principles. They talk of transparency, scrutiny, critique, and reproducibility. So what role does that mean for a library in terms of what that principle means? Equality of opportunities. So what does that mean when we speak to our researchers? Does it mean collaboration? Does it mean going beyond their boundaries as researchers to try and engage other researchers outside their domain? Does it mean an opportunity to share their data, etc., etc.? Then responsibility, respect, and accountability. What does that mean? Is this the way we should talk about FAIR, FAIR, as it applies to research data? Maybe. Collaboration, participation, and inclusion. What does that mean for our researchers and also us as librarians, etc.? Flexibility. Obviously, the flexibility is the model for open science, that anyone who has access to the internet, he has access to what is provided by another person or by another institution. Then is the sustainability, etc. So those are the key values and principles that I would like us to engage. And obviously, I have had the need for training or retraining for us as specialists. And like Daisy was suggesting that, we learn most of these things on the go at conferences, maybe at these workshops. But after these workshops, do you go back and say, I want to learn about these things at an individual level? Maybe those are some of the things we need to engage before we even go and approach or tell the story to our researchers, because they want us to really be well in tune with what is happening outside for us to tell the story. You can go forward. Then, so therefore, we need to understand the recommended current action areas for open science is implementation, as I've already mentioned, and obviously our open science policy is also coming out of the open science principles of the UNESCO. So that is the promoting a common understanding, developing an enabling policy environment of which we are coming with policies, but do we check what other policies say from other institutions? I think in the past I've shared our policies here at UP with other colleagues, etc. You're going fast forward. In investing in human resources, I have already spoken about it, but what does it mean for the library? Do we just take our staff, change them their titles and give them these roles? It's a thing that we need to do an introspection to understand what that means. And sometimes we put the wrong people in these new positions, and then they fail to articulate what open science principles or values they are, what those will mean. Obviously, fostering the culture of open science is a big issue, particularly at institutions that are still closed up, etc. Because some institutions, our researchers have not moved away from open access and they have not understood it better. So how do we then promote that culture of open science at our institutions? So we need also to do and provide data about where we are coming from and data of where we are going to, etc. Then promoting innovative approaches. Yes, we can do that. We have demonstrated that LIBI can work in the library, but what does it do for the, a first year student who is coming on campus? What is the use of LIBI in the university? So these innovations that we put in place, can they also play a role in open access? Maybe yes. Then promoting cooperation within the library sector itself is required, particularly for us, the academic libraries who have, done quite a lot around open access. We can also now start going out and share our experience with our colleagues. And fortunately, for me, I've been asked by our LIASA branch here in Joburg, in Gauteng, to give a talk there. So that's what we should be doing as maybe the pioneers in these areas, to share our knowledge with our colleagues. And obviously, the investment of infrastructure is a requirement. Obviously, this is where we need to engage with our institutions to ensure that our systems or our platforms are sustained and are invested on, or they are budgeted for on a yearly basis. Because if you don't do that, you will find that your platforms that you have created, they are going to, to be found wanting in terms of the rapid developments with ICT and technologies, etc. So these are the areas of actions that we need to be mindful of as institutions. Next slide, please. Right. So when I look at open science, basically from a practitioner's view, we need to catalog, we need to digitize, we need to digitally curate what we have. But what does open science mean for the society that we are surrounded, which surround us? So at UP, we are talking of achieving Society 5.0, which actually leads to societal impact. So if you look at this diagram, you will notice they say knowledge and information are not shared, and across sector value is difficult to create. So what do we need to do? We need to connect all people and things, all sorts of knowledge and information will then be shared, and totally new value will be born. So that's the first incentive that we are getting from open science, and when we link it to the society. Then on the top side, they say currently a variety of constraints exist with respect to social problems, such as the aging society, not to mention our electricity problems, not to mention about water issues that we are starting to hit, that are starting to hit our cities and also in rural areas. So all these difficulties, how do we then connect them to the open science dilemma or you know, thought? So societal issues will be overcome and humans will be liberated from various types of constraints if the knowledge that we are generating at institutional level is shared and, you know, using the open access platforms. Then possibility for open to humans will expand through the use of robots, automatic driving cars, etc. All these things are coming on board, not mention just cars and robots that some of our institutions have acquired, but as information, as the information sector, what are we talking when we talk of automating systems? So we could be talking of how to link various, you know, things that are happening on our campuses and be able to, you know, link between what the robot at an engineering faculty is producing and ensuring that it's producing data and it's also providing research papers based on the outputs those researchers will be publishing. So those are some of the things that I think the AI will free humans from the burdensome work of analyzing huge amounts of information. Obviously, at a library level, we are starting to talk about data analysis and how we use data to, you know, to inform decisions that we make and also influence the strategies that we take, as it were. So with an overflow of information, the work of finding and analyzing the information desired is difficult and may be burdensome. So as information people, how do we ensure that our researchers and society actually don't you know, suffocate from the information that is available? So this is where I think the SDG solution comes into board, how we recategorize some of the retrospective information that we have generated over years, particularly the theses, the research papers, and the data sets that have been created. We recategorize them according to the 17 SDGs to ensure that when our users are looking for information or the information is sent to their alerts, it is easily accessible. Next slide, please. So how society works, 5.0 works, you can see from the diagram there. The current information society is 4.0. We have the cyberspace, the cloud, and all those things. So from a library's perspective, are we not thinking of putting our data or our information in the cloud? I think some universities were already doing that. So all these things will minimize the physical spaces that sometimes hamper the usage of our libraries. And I think space issues has become an issue, particularly at expanding universities where a number of students are coming on board. So this gives us a time to actually negotiate with our executive to get the best information technologies that can place all our resources online that we can, so that, you know, people or the public or our clients in the universities or public institutions, they have access to information. And this is what then takes a person to do their own searches and navigate the various systems that we are providing. So essentially what this means also is, as LIS or academic university libraries, do we have a centralized platforms where we can enable our users to search our research outputs? Maybe yes. For the SDGs, I think UP has provided that platform. We are currently harvesting all the SDG related content that has been categorized in some of the repositories. So if you have not started, please do so, such that all the SDGs that are harvested for the South African reporting of its own SDGs, the system can track it. That system that we have at UP is the one that actually submits its findings to the presidency, etc. So there is also Society 5.0, which speaks to cyberspace, the big data, the artificial intelligence, and all the other nice things that our scientists are talking about, sensor information. And I think what prompted us as UP to think about Society 5.0 this year was actually we hosted our first research data seminar a few weeks ago. And what we learned from the various faculty presenters that were here, there is a lot going on which we didn't know at a library level was happening. So going forward, we are engaging faculties actually to come and demonstrate what they talk about when they talk about big data, artificial intelligence, et cetera, and all these things speaks to also the SDGs. I was amazed that one of our computer scientists here was actually doing something from a humanities perspective, working with tracking of any media that speaks to societal development and translating commentaries that come of SABC and translating them into various South African languages. So as a project, I think it's something that highlighted that, there is also collaboration that can happen between the library and his faculty, because one thing that he was lacking, which he expressed that he needed a home for this research outputs that they were generating. And obviously what we are now going to do is to provide that those resources a home in our UP space going forward. And that then it will be, that content will then become easily accessible to any users that will have access to or are looking for such content online. We can go forward.
About 5 minutes left, Lazarus.
Thank you. Yeah, so when we talk of the SDGs, let's not forget the economic development solutions to societal problems, as I've highlighted. And these are just, images that simulates some of the things that I've mentioned. In our particular case, we are having energy issues in South Africa. So when we have energy issues, how does our context from an open science and a library perspective and a user perspective engage with those issues? It will be amazing maybe one day just to highlight what it means to have no power and demonstrate it at a library level and ask our researchers to come and speak about it based on what we would have gathered as a library, as part of sharing knowledge in a context of SDGs, etc. So I can't name a lot of problems that we have, but I think there are quite many, and we do know them, and our faculties know them. But we need then to prioritize and engage them and say, can you bring all these research initiatives that are happening at faculty level before they become publications, and so that we are able then to harness each and every aspect of what is happening within their research projects. Particularly for those that have such chairs, we need to conscientize that whatever they have or the research chairs that you may have in your institution to be brought forward to the library as part of the SDG knowledge harnessing. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I just came up with this diagram to just illustrate some of the things we can do for open science as library. It speaks to digitalization, and for those colleagues who may know that term, at UP, we are currently doing an institutional digital retrospective in terms of what needs to happen at the digitalization process. And obviously, in the library context, we talk of digital curation, which is your repository, your digitization, etc., including your cataloging. Let's not forget about cataloging when we talk of digital curation. Information literacy, what role are you going to play as a library? Sometimes we have a disjuncture between information literacy and what our digital scholarship office is doing, or a digital scholarship office. I know some institutions you don't have digital scholarship centers, but for those that have, or some that are planning to have, this is an area you need to really look at and align it with what you are thinking in terms of open science. And then we have the open scholarship, which relates to the actual publications and dissemination of the research outputs. And that leads to our discovery services. So when I talk of discovery services, I'm talking of our cataloging units in terms of positioning the content. As I mentioned, we need to do retrospective categorization of current content, and to ensure that our digitalization processes are intact. So do not start from scratch, but use current workflows and platforms to enhance your metadata of existing records and in retrospective cataloging, as it were. And one of the things that I would urge all, particularly university libraries, is that you need to establish a library expert team to develop a workflow for digital curation of all your local and online content databases. Sometimes we do these things in a rush and don't look at the best practice that we are learning from other colleagues from different continents. Next slide, please. Yes, and this actually speaks to the whole open science dilemma that we need to engage with. Open science skills, we are borrowing them. Some of us, we didn't train about them. We have learned them on the road. But there is a need at maybe at CHELSA level or a LIASA level to start actually putting all these, the inside 5 circles that you see, your fair data, what is it? We need to train on fair data. We need to train on metrics and rewards. Obviously, the rewards part sits with our colleagues at the research offices, but metrics belongs to us as libraries, and we must influence metrics. In the context of University of Pretoria, we have now subscribed to Outmetrics Explorer, and we are rolling out Outmetrics across our faculties. And in order for us to report on the societal impact of their work, vis-a-vis the citation bibliometrics that we have always preached, but we are, as the Open Scholarship Office, we are starting to speak about the societal impact and the alternative metrics, as it were. And obviously the scholarly publishing, as you will see, we have demonstrated, and some of your institutions have also demonstrated the role of libraries in promoting the localized open scholarship, which is your open access publishing of journals, as well as the preprints, and at a more advanced level, all the open access content that we can harvest from our universities and putting it in our repositories. And also talk of the open access monographs for those that have gone that far, and as well as the data. And so what does this entail to research integrity? So I think for those that have seen some of our offering at UP, we are engaging with the research integrity and ethics as a library deliverable. And we are actually working very well with some of our faculties to educate our researchers, both established researchers, early careers, the postgraduate students and undergraduate students. In a way, this will then drive them into them being the citizens of science that we want. And going forward, then once they understand this diagram, everything will be super and will be on that super highway. and not competing with one another, but ensuring that our researchers can also collaborate with other researchers at their other institutions who also must have the same background as them. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I just picked out a lot of things, the role of open access repositories. I'm not gonna reignite these ones. We understand what repositories means to the sector. But most importantly, like I said, we must not leave the cataloging units. They must be part and parcel of this drive in terms of discoverability. I think what they have learned in the past is quite different from the open science dilemma, because we use different terminologies. The vocabulary may not be controlled when we speak of open science. So these are some of the things that they need also to be educated or reskilled on. And obviously our IT teams and our website managers, they need to understand the search engine optimization for our content to be searchable on various platforms. Next slide, please. Yeah, I just picked out these 4, I would say, boxes for us to understand the role that we should be placing on open science, particularly on the open access aspects from a library point of view, that we must understand the control vocabularies that we need to generate, particularly when we talk of the SDGs in context, and also when we talk of the persistent identifiers, how they should be working for our repositories, etc. I understand some of you may have repositories, but have you applied for your PIDs with the International Persistent Identifier organization? Maybe no. So if you don't, that becomes a problem. Because if you look now, Elsevier does have an SDG hub platform. So what it might mean is SDG, the Elsevier database may be used for reporting to, to the international community. So if you don't use the persistent identifiers that are recognized by these international platforms, you might find that your metadata may not be describing everything that is required for your SDGs to be visible and impactful. So obviously we need metadata skills to be aligned to the SDGs as we move forward. So there are particular skills that are still required to ensure that open science roadmap is understood, etc., etc. We can go forward. Next slide. Yes. So in terms of where we are and where we are learning, some of us, I always look at KUA as my my place of learning, because there I interact with a lot of colleagues who are based in different continents and different countries, but who have an understanding of what open repositories are, because open repositories are our drivers for open science. So it's one is the petrol and one is the vehicle. So you need to understand how the international communities looks at these repositories as we move forward. And there is a diagram there that illustrates the current repositories and the next generation repositories that they are recommending. So you will see in the first left-hand side of my slide, there is little that was done. But when you move to the next generation of repositories, there is a lot that is happening. So in terms of open science, it is actually anchored on the next generation of repositories. So we need to understand where we are placing our repositories as we move forward. Next slide. I think that will be the last one. Yeah, so invest in the capacity development, technologies and softwares, etc. I'm not gonna reinforce some of these things, but one thing I want to ask us all to do is to share our usage data statistics in terms of how our repositories are doing. I think we haven't done that. And unfortunately, we don't have one portal where all our repositories are networked at the moment in terms of the new content that we're generating, like our research data, and also the research outputs in terms of journals and open access chapters and books, etc. Next slide, I think I'm done. Yeah, so it's just to reinforce some of the things that needs to be done for to ensure that you have an best practice in places and to ensure that you comply with the international requirements for some of these repositories to be networked or synchronized with the other harvesters that are out there. Next slide, please. Yes, so I just wanted to bring these examples to the colleagues, particularly those in the other domains like our public libraries and special libraries. So if you are still imagining or your collections are small, these are some of the things you can start categorizing and placing on your websites for users to interact with and to use as databases. So you will notice some of the databases are quite huge. They have over 300 million contents like BES. And then you also have 243 million of papers and data in core, etc. Then you have sub-regional repositories that are like La Referencia, which actually speaks to the whole sub-American countries. I think 12 of them are members, so they are populating that repository as it were. So it's a regional repository, of which in Africa we would need to have one. In South Africa, we haven't done yet, but we will need to have one. And then obviously you look at the open air one for the European Union, and you also look at the share one for the United States. And so if you are looking for any content and you don't want your researchers to be searching via Google, you can direct them to these resources, and they are very useful and valuable. Next slide, please. Yes, I just also plugged some references for people to look at in terms of how us as librarians should be looking at these sustainable development goals. This is research done by our practitioners or academics. So I always value the work that is done by our colleagues. Like Des mentioned, there is the left hand and the right hand. So we must then combine the two hands to be effective. So thank you. On my slide, you will see where we are as a university. We have the UP space, which is the main repository for other collections and our research outputs, publications. And then we have the research data one, which runs on Figshare. And I have also put the link to the South African SDG Hub, which is hosted here by UCT, by UP. And also it's a platform that was developed by the library, working with one of our faculty academics. And it's, for those that want to hear more about it, you will be presenting this hub at our Open Science Forum on Wednesday. So thank you, colleagues.
Thank you so much, Lazarus. So much information. Thank you so much. This was so informative. Just two quick questions. I'm just going to paraphrase a bit. One question from Denise is, are the majority of data sets in thesis and dissertations included in open access institutional repositories?
I didn't get your question.
Are the majority of data sets in thesis and dissertations or from thesis and dissertations included in the open access institutional repositories?
Yes, we did launch our open access data repository last year, and we do now have a policy to ensure that all the data coming from thesis at master's and doctoral level should be deposited within the repository. Obviously, what we are struggling with is to educate the researchers on how to manage their DMPs to start with. So we'll be launching our DMP tool shortly, and the good thing is we have also managed to put some of the aspects to the DMP in the institutional policy, which will speak to the IGAP research policy of the university. So all these strategies, I think, is just to align so that all our data sets that are derived from research outputs are collected. But the good thing, I think you did see that we had 2 researchers that were nominated for the national, I've forgotten the acronym for the organization, but I would say it's part of the National Science Council, where they were nominated for the best curators of data. So we are using them as some of our ambassadors going forward. And that's why we're lucky this year to actually start hosting the research data symposium. Okay, so going forward, we do have quite a number of research outputs that are have been deposited, particularly with our, I would say the early career, the established researchers.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. There's another question from Matamela about the difference between open science and open access, but I want to ask you if you can maybe go into the chat and just answer them there. Okay. Thank you again. We really appreciate your time and your knowledge. Colleagues, we are running a bit late, so I would just like one last person, Mr. Charlie Mapunchane Molepo, our Deputy Director here at the UFS Library for Research and Scholarly Communications, and the LIASA Chair-elect for 2022 and 2023, just to give the vote of thanks. Thank you, Charlie. Charlie, just unmute, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Charlie, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, colleagues. I'm excited and I'm glad we were able to have an inaugural CHELSA LIASA Open Science Seminar. As Linda indicated, our view is that currently we are stretching ourselves very thin. And because of that, we tend to miss out on a number of things. As Daisy already indicated, as practitioners, we need to learn from each other. So as LIASA, one of the things that we're looking at having this national, at the national level rather than at the institutional level, because now we find ourselves competing amongst ourselves. And in the process, a lot of people who would be having their, on Wednesday, UP, we will be missing out on that because the other institution will be organizing their own. So we're really looking forward to a situation where together with CHELSA and other national bodies, we would come together and have a country workshops and country seminars, country colloquium on country, and without listening to Lazarus just now, it's clear that we definitely need a workshop. Each of today's speakers, just to be the only speaker for the day and have that workshop running through, and that's what we will be looking at. So maybe let me take this time to say thank you very much, firstly, to CHELSA. When we came knocking and signed an MOA, this is one of the first collaboration that we're doing together, and they have come on board. They've sourced the international speaker. They have made sure that they market the symposium, and we really appreciate to you, Daisy, Anke, and your colleagues. And we'd like to say thank you to Senlik. When we came knocking, through the chairperson of the board, they were able to make their speaker available to share with us the initiatives that as a country we're making. And also, again, we'd like to say thank you very much to Dr. Niman Singh in absentia. And thank you very much to CHELSA for organizing, because we were thinking, as a country, we have not done much in terms of OERs. And it was quite interesting to see what other countries are already doing on OER. As a developing country, we cannot afford to. And like Lazarus was just saying, you know, talking open science, it might be nice, but, you know, doing those baby steps, talking open access, talking OERs, leading to that big terminology of open science, it's something that we need to look at. And thank you very much, in absentia, Dr. Singh. And to the committee, to Linda, LIASA office, the colleagues from here at UFS who assisted me, Cornell, our program director, thank you, colleagues. This has been wonderful. And colleagues from LIASA office, most of you were on holiday after the long conference, you took leave, but you from time to time, you take time off your leave to assist us in communicating. Thank you very much. And lastly, colleagues, thank you for your patience. We know that we went overboard, but those information was so informative that we couldn't just cut speakers as if we were in a conference. We are not in a conference. We wanted you to have information that you might not have heard, but also you wanted to make sure that colleagues are able to share. So that's why we are very lenient when coming to time management. We apologize in advance because we know that some of you might have scheduled other meetings, but thank you for your respect and thank you for your patience. And thank you very much. I hope we will meet again very soon. And in my mind, I think we would have workshops with these speakers just to take this process forward because there is a need. Thank you very much. Thank you, Cornell.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, colleagues. I hope you have a very productive and informative Open Access Week. Have a good day.
We didn't have a group photo. Which is weird.
Colleagues, before you leave, can you all turn our cameras on, please? Can you turn our cameras on? I knew that was coming. I didn't realize that Daisy had not left. Can we turn? Yes, thank you. Let's turn our cameras on. Let's Anna Marie and Kagiso, experts on taking Zoom photos. At line, my colleague from UJ, switch your camera on. Yes, there's a call. Take one, take two. Come on. Matlacha. Spangseni, come on. Denise. That's a picture, that's not you. Thank you. Yeah, you look lovely. Let's keep on taking pictures, colleagues from the LIASA office. Thank you, Denise. Nice to see you. Yes. Thank you. Sure. Thank you, colleagues. Have a good afternoon. Thank you. Bye.